Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. When it comes to the realm of harm reduction within the psychedelic space, many of us are aware of concepts such as minimum effective dosing. However, many of us are also unaware that our lifestyle habits, such as diet, exercise, water intake, and sleep, also play a big role in this realm. One area that I have been particularly interested in recently with regards to this idea is the notion that many of these medicines can deplete our mineral levels, and without a method to reinstate these minerals in our body, we can end up potentially doing more harm than good within our ceremonies as a whole. Stopping back by the show today to dive into this topic, and I imagine many others on our epic heart flow journey, is a gentleman who is one of, if not the most knowledgeable individual I have had the pleasure of meeting when it comes to physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual holistic health. He is a holistic health practitioner, a 5 MEO DMT facilitator, a medical Qigong doctor, and a mineral alchemist. And along with all of these amazing accolades, he is also a heart-centered, joyous person who is an absolute blast to chat with, which are all the reasons why I continue having him back on the show for all of you to benefit from his knowledge and expertise in these fields. So please, give me a big hand in welcoming my man, Jason Ganzuk, back onto the show. Jason, brother man, so good to have you here with me today, man.
What's going on there, brother man? It's an honor to be on your show, and I'm really looking forward to diving deep into minerals and the connection that it has with working with plant medicines and psychedelics.
Hell yeah. And guys, I've already asked Jason before, how he got into psychedelics. So if you guys are interested in that part, go back to I think this is the 4th episode we've done on this show together. It's the 3rd or 4th, one or the other. I forget how many we've done on this show, but we've done multiple. So make sure you guys go check those out. But Jason, I'm going to dive right into it, man. Let's take the cat out of the bag, as they say. So when it comes to mineral levels, right? Like this is a concept that I heard about first. I'd heard about it a couple of years ago, but there was a gentleman who, maybe actually, he runs a float tank company. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was on the show about, probably like 2 months ago. And he blew my mind with just like, what he was telling me about salt quality and, different minerals and things like that. So I'd love if you could first, talk about, to at least, give a good context for this, like, why do minerals matter? And especially, why do they matter right now in society?
Definitely, and that's a really potent question. And to kind of just give a short answer, as I can definitely get into the nitty-gritty on that, is really looking at the core of what health is and seeing really what is influencing all of the processes in our body, and seeing how minerals are really at the top of the hierarchy system. We have 102 main minerals. Out of those 102 minerals, we have magnesium, which is a very essential mineral that a lot of us are aware of. Now, that one mineral is responsible for roughly about 40 to 45% of metabolic processes. So if for any reason we're deficient in that one mineral, magnesium, 40 to 45% of the metabolic processes are going to be compromised. Therefore, it doesn't matter what supplements we're taking in regards to vitamins, even minerals, if we're not taking the right minerals, the enzyme processes and the way they are communicating with hormones, there's going to be a significant compromise. So when it comes to health, minerals are influencing really all of the processes in our body. Therefore, if there's any sort of deficiency or deficiencies, our energy capacity is going to significantly be deprived, and we're going to have a significant energy deficit. So when it comes to looking at health, it's important to see that all of these quote-unquote diseases are really just abbreviations and spokes that are coming from the core, the hub. At that core, we have oxidative stress. Now, with oxidative stress, it comes with not having the correct dynamic and relationship between iron and copper. Iron representing oxygen, copper representing energy. If there's a lack of copper, or if there's unbound copper that can't get properly expressed and utilized in the body, therefore we're not going to be able to activate the oxygen into H2O and into energy, which is going to create oxidative stress. With oxidative stress, we create inflammation, and then over time, we'll create cell death. So that's really at the core of really what we would call diseases. So seeing fibromyalgia, arthritis, cardiovascular heart disease, kidney disease, autoimmune disease, these are all just abbreviations from oxidative stress. So really what is causing oxidative stress is an imbalance in the mineral realm. So our mineral status is significantly important when it comes to looking at disease, mental, emotional disorders, etc. Stress is one of the biggest things that has the most significant impact on our mineral status. So just daily stress, all stress summates, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual stress. So if we're going through financial stress, if we're going through relationship stress, if we're going through plant medicine stress, as being in a journey is a stressor. If we're going through integration stress, this is depleting our minerals. So if we're going into a plant medicine ceremony already in a imbalanced and deficient mineral state, and we're working with medicines, we're going to be creating more of a deficiency. And that's why when it comes to integration, a lot of people are having a lot of challenges with utilizing the awareness and clarity that they got from the medicine, but they're having a big blockage when it comes to really integrating their awareness that they were able to really cultivate through working with the medicine. And I myself used to be there for years, as I would have all of this awareness, but it's like, it was very hard to really integrate that awareness to where I can stay present in it and take action with it. And seeing that a lot of my mineral imbalances were the blockages that were preventing me from really being in the action of that awareness that I got from working with that medicine. So to really answer that question in a few sentences, our minerals are responsible for how our enzymes are expressing themselves. Our enzymes are responsible for how they communicate with our hormones. So when it comes to hormonal imbalances, the first place to look are the minerals, because the minerals are responsible for enzyme reactions, and our enzymes are what are responsible for signaling and communicating to our hormones. So it goes minerals, enzymes, and hormones. Our minerals are running the show. Our minerals are running our body.
That's so amazing, man. And, for any of you guys listening too, like, there's a big challenge right now with the topsoils being depleted, right? And this is why so much of our food is minerally deficient. And that's why, that's one of the many reasons why so much mineral, supplementation is, being looked at these days. But then also you fall into the category, and you would be able to go more into this, but I imagine that, gut health is a big issue with this because of all the glyphosate being sprayed, even on organic food, right? Like that organic farm might be next to a farm that's, conventionally farms, which is spraying glyphosate. And so then you're eating this food, it's, wrecking your gut lining, then you might not have good absorption of minerals. I imagine there's a lot that we could dive into too, but, that's a big reason why, this is such a big topic right now. And also, I think humans are starting to understand more things about the process, right? We're starting to actually understand true healthcare rather than sick care that's been labeled as healthcare for the last 100 years or whatever's been going on with the pharmaceutical industry. This is actual healthcare, right? Saying right now, everyone listening to this going, I wonder what my mineral levels are. And then maybe somehow getting a test or something like that, and then actually supplementing to bring those minerals back into harmony and back into balance in your body. That is what actual healthcare is, right? It's proactive, not reactive. Now, again, there's nothing necessarily bad about realizing, oh shit, I didn't do what I should have done, and then practicing some things to get back into homeostasis. But if we can catch them before they become an issue, we are being proactive in nature, and I think that's really important. Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Definitely, and a good metaphor to give is, if you get a flat tire, you have a hole in your tire, and that's why you have a flat tire. Either you got a nail or something cut your tire. When it comes to correcting, the flat tire, just plugging it temporarily is, for example, like taking, a hormone when you have a hormonal imbalance, or taking certain vitamins, etc. You're not necessarily effectively repairing the whole. All what you're doing is treating the symptom, So when it comes to really correcting imbalances in the body, then imbalances can't actually get corrected at the underlying reason on why there's an imbalance until the mineral status gets properly balanced and there's a homeostasis state. Therefore, you want to strengthen the host, and the host can only be strengthened through correcting the mineral deficiencies that one has. Now, a lot of the reasons on why we're wanting to work with plant medicines come from mineral imbalances and deficiencies that we have. Anxiety, depression, have it be even schizophrenia, have it be resentment, anger, sadness, grief, etc. All of these mental emotional disturbances and disorders are simply expressions of what's happening in the mineral realm. And it's really important to understand that our mineral constitution in which we have is imprinted in us when we're in the fetus. So whatever a mother's mineral status was is what we inherit and come into this world with, which is why we're seeing a significant amount of childhood diseases and illnesses because of the mineral imprint that they got from their mother. And we're seeing more and more and more of this. We're seeing a lot of iodine deficiencies in children. We're seeing a lot of zinc deficiencies in children. And it's really important to understand that those two key minerals are very essential for development and growth. And we're seeing a lot of improper development and a lot of improper growth. So when it comes to working with plant medicines, in my opinion, it's essential to look at one's mineral status. And if you're not, you're missing a big key component when it comes to really effectively navigating them through the healing that they need. And the medicine is just one tool. And the minerals, again, is just one tool. Correcting one's mineral status isn't going to be a cure-all. Now, in certain situations, can it be? Yes. But it allows one to have the foundation, to have the capacity to really integrate the clarity and awareness that they get through working with plant medicine so they can effectively actually heal.
Exactly.
And not just treat symptoms, and not just feel like they have to go do more medicine, etc.
Exactly. It's almost like the analogy of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So if you want to have a mission in life, well, you first got to make sure that you have a roof over your head. You got to make sure that you have food in your fridge. You got to make sure you have healthy water you can drink. You got to make sure you can sleep. If you have those things, right, they're not going to be a complete life by any means, right? Like, you're going to want more, but at least you have the ability to feel safe enough to be able to create whatever it is you end up creating, right? It's like, it is that foundational level, exactly like you were saying. And, I think it's interesting because, I think I say this in most episodes with different subjects, but we never learned about any of this in school. At least I didn't, right? Maybe college, depending on where you went, but these are the things that I feel should be taught in school, right? Like, again, we learn about the Pythagorean theorem, but not taxes, not health, not mental health, emotional health, how this all entangles together. And I think that for a lot of people that are right now getting into, the psychedelic space, I imagine they are doing the best with the information they have, but yet there's not a lot of people talking about this. And this is just one of the many reasons I wanted to have you on to dive into this, because I think it's so important. The reason I started Highly Optimized was not just to be optimized with plant medicines or optimized with health or optimized with spirituality. It's to have all of it together, right? To be highly optimized in every single aspect of your life. And so I'm curious for you, if someone wanted to test their mineral levels, what would you recommend, especially in the plant medicine space? Like, would you recommend a before test, not a during, but an after test? Like, what would be your approach? Say if I came to you and I was like, I want to do a plant medicine, what would you do in terms of mineral levels and things like that?
Definitely a really good question. In my opinion, really the most revealing and reliable test there is out there for anybody. Not necessarily when it comes to just working with plant medicine, but in general for optimizing health and for getting down to the underlying reason on why there's a disease process happening and manifesting in your body. And that is the HTMA test, hair tissue mineral analysis test. That is one of the most revealing and accurate tests that really demonstrate and show what is happening in the body at a cellular level. Blood, urine is giving a quick snapshot of what is happening at that time that you got the blood or the urine draw. When you're doing a hair tissue test, it's a biopsy of what is happening at a cellular level. So a lot of blood and lab work really can't pick up on imbalances and deficiencies that are happening, for example, in the adrenals and in the thyroid. But with an HTMA test, you can clearly see really what is happening that lab, blood, and urine work can't necessarily detect and pick up on. So the HTMA test, and it's important to understand that the test is really only as reliable and good as the practitioner can interpret it and evaluate it. I can know more about the person than they know about themselves just through understanding the report and analyzing it. So it's pretty phenomenal to see that pretty much the way I look at an HTMA report is an expression of one shadow. Because a lot of people aren't really necessarily in tune and aware with the symptoms that are really manifesting in their body. A lot of people aren't aware of how fatigued and exhausted they are. But therefore, in the HTMA report, you can clearly see and demonstrate it and explain it to them to where they have more awareness. You can see if one is going through a lot of aggressiveness. You can see if one is experiencing a lot of unconscious frustration that they're suppressing and repressing. You can see if one is experiencing a lot of anger. You can see if one is in a dysfunctional relationship. It's a pretty phenomenal report that you're really able to interpret. And I've been really going down the rabbit hole of learning a lot of different ways and peeling back the layers to where I can really, really understand what it is I'm looking at and understanding the importance of the relationships that minerals have with each other. And the way the relationships are expressed are through the ratios. So looking at the minerals in an isolated form, calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, those are very significant to look at. But what is more important is the relationship that they have with each other. The relationship between calcium, phosphorus, the relationship between sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper. And through looking at the ratios, you can really understand what is happening at a hormonal level in the individual as well. You can see what one's estrogen status is. You can see what one's testosterone and progesterone status is just through looking at the ratios. So I see a lot of practitioners out there that are, sharing a lot of information about HTMA reports. But in my opinion, I feel like a lot of people are really not seeing the nitty gritty that you can really see and that can be revealed in really looking at the report. They look at it quickly, what's high, what's low. Okay, bring what's high back down, bring what's low back up, and we'll bring balance that way. And that's not necessarily the way it works. And another really significant component to really look at is toxic metals and seeing the intimate relationship that toxic metals have with minerals. For example, cadmium. If one has even a slight elevation of cadmium, that will display zinc. So when one has a zinc deficiency, they're more susceptible to having a cadmium toxicity level. So understanding that relationship, and just because on your report, for example, if you just get the first test done, because the thing is with HTMA testing, in order for it to really be effective, you have to retest every 3 months for up to 1 to 2 years to really bring one back into a homeostasis and balanced state. And the reason why you have to test every 3 months is because when there is the correct supplementation with vitamins and minerals, the levels are going to start improving. And the dose that you take to get those levels back up to a balanced range can actually create an imbalance in the opposite direction. So you have to know when to adjust the dose, because the medicine isn't necessarily in the medicine itself. The medicine is in the dose. And that goes for cannabis, that goes for tobacco, that goes for really any sort of medicine there is out there. The dose can make it a medicine and the dose can make it a poison. And the same goes with minerals. So just going out there and supplementing with a high dose magnesium, yeah, that can be medicinal and therapeutic for short term, but long term, it can actually have, significant negative effects.
Wow. That was so well articulated, as always, my man. I love that because for me, I'm very curious about this stuff too. I've been a fanatic for health for a long time, but there's so much more information coming out. And that's one of the things that I've really been curious on. I haven't got much lab work done. Luckily, I feel pretty darn good most of the time. Yet I do have some curiosities that, I know are not going to be figured out by whatever conventional, means is out there, because there's really no conventional means that would even really give you anything except a pharmaceutical at the end of the rainbow, for lack of a better term. But I think that looking into these things is so crucial because, again, a lot like what you said in there was so accurate, and I want to reflect on it too. this whole idea that one of the reasons we're going to plant medicines could be because of mineral deficiencies, right? So like, a lot of the times, like we just know we feel off. We don't even know how to articulate what feels off, like, oh, my mental processing or like my emotional regulation or what it is, right? We just know we feel off. And so like, again, it's like, cool, what one of the 10 million different issues could this be? Well, if you keep guessing, it's like, trying to mop the beach up, it's never going to happen, right? Because there's so many different things. And every time that you do something that doesn't work, that takes, a hit of your confidence away, and it takes takes a hit out of your passion for figuring out the issue away, puts you into more overwhelm, all of these other things, which if you're already minerally deficient, add on to it. Then you go, well, I must need another ceremony. Then you blow all that shit open, right? And then you go back to your life trying to reintegrate. Now you're more blown up than before. So it's definitely something I've been seeing throughout the psychedelic community is just, like anything, when I think more awareness and more information, from different schools is coming out about it, more people are essentially using it as a permission slip. So for why they should be interacting with psychedelics every week or, potentially even every day if it comes to cannabis. When in reality, like, I talked to a guy recently who was like, well, I use cannabis because the world is in a really fucked up place and we were never meant to live this way. And so cannabis helps me. And I'm like, okay, but do you really want that to be your story? Right? Like, do you really want to think that you can't exist without cannabis because the world's just not the way it should be? Right? Or do you want to think that the way the world is starts with the world inside of you and how you frame the world? And if you work on that, the exterior world will begin changing. Like, there's never been a time in history where there's been complete peace on Earth, right? At least not in our species here as Homo sapiens. And so, like, at the end of the day, this is why I'm so big on, not to get in the rant here, but here I am anyway. So like, this is why I'm so big on not watching the news and things like that, because this gentleman, he gets into a lot of conspiracy theories and things like that. And that kind of stuff is fun to a certain point. But at the same time, if you end up thinking the world's way worse than it actually is, like, even if you end up realizing it's as worse as you really thought it was, cool. Unless you can do something to change that right now, what did that information do to help you? And so again, the only way we can serve is if we're pouring from an overflowing cup. And if we're constantly depleting our minerals and, externalizing our power onto these medicines, we're not going to be able to actually pour from an overflowing cup because we're going to be trying to pour ours at the same time we're trying to pour it to someone else. And that is the wounded healer. And there's a lot of that going on.
Exactly. And, I have to say that every single symptom that one can be experiencing can simply be a byproduct of a mineral deficiency. And in getting back into the ratios is a pretty fascinating thing to really understand is, for example, when there's an imbalance in the zinc to copper ratio, there actually is hidden mercury right there. So you can actually see the ratio that's not necessarily associated with the toxic metal graph, which would display an elevation of mercury. But if the zinc to copper ratio is in balance for any reason, if it's low or if it's high, there's actually hidden mercury in that ratio, which is affecting that ratio. So that's another very important thing to understand when it comes to really interpreting HTMA testing is seeing the hidden deficiencies or imbalances that are in these ratios that most practitioners aren't able to really understand and interpret in the HTMA test. Therefore, they're missing a lot of key information. And if you're missing key information, you're going to be missing key things when it comes to putting one on a correct remineralizing protocol.
That makes perfect sense. It's like, for me, I take magnesium in a couple different forms every day. I take the 3 and 8 in the morning, and I take the breakthrough from Biooptimizers at night, and definitely helps me sleep. But again, like, I just started realizing recently, like, well, I've gotten really lucky in terms of, like, I understand the basics. I'm really good at the basics of always eating healthy and, getting enough sleep and yada, yada. But at the same time, when I started performing at a much higher level, running the business, doing the podcast, and really like playing a very fine line game of excitement and anxiety, like I started realizing like, oh, now a lot of other things that might have been more subtle before are coming out because now I'm looking to perform at the level where like my word retention needs to be on point. My memory needs to be on point. I need to be able to, move through challenging situations and then still show up for a call after and have a smiling face on and be like, completely okay with it. So to operate at that level, I started realizing some inconsistencies that, I had felt before, but again, like little nicks and dings and things like that. And, curiosity wandering around like certain tight spots in my body. And even though I've thrown thousands of dollars at it to try to fix it in many different modalities, it's just lingering. And, I imagine there's mental, emotional components there, which I've dealt with in certain energy work. But at the end of the day, it's just like, I want to hit it from every angle. because I'm ultimately just genuinely passionate about becoming highly optimized and staying there. And so it's a lifelong journey, but at the same time, all of these steps, as I see them, are very key. Because again, like if I do a plant medicine, I want to get the most out of it. And I also want to be able to do what I want the next day too, and not feel completely depleted. And so that's a huge part of it. I'm curious for you, we've talked about just the general quasi term plant medicine ceremonies, but are there certain medicines you've noticed that deplete more minerals than others, or different ones? Of course, cannabis is one that probably most people listening to this are using more frequently than other ones. So we can touch on that. But, specifically, I'm thinking about like the synthetic ones like MDMA and things like that. Like, for anyone who's done MDMA, the next day is a little interesting. Like for me, it's never been depression or anything. It's just genuinely tired. Now, part of that is you usually stay up pretty late, but I'm curious if you've noticed any correlations between different medicines, either for yourself or your clients, that, deplete either certain minerals or certain sectors of minerals together.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say ayahuasca, wachuma, and psilocybin, MDMA, sassafras, those are the most significant ones that seem to have the most impact on our mineral status. Not to say that other plant medicines and entheogenic medicines and sacraments don't have an impact on the mineral status, but those ones seem to be the ones that have the most significant impact that cause more depletion. And I think a lot of people can relate to that after working with MDMA, ecstasy, sassafras, ayahuasca, wachuma is, even, a couple of days after ceremony, you can be feeling really good. And then you end up going through some phases of feeling very low, have it be an onset of depression, anxiety, insomnia, which is really just copper toxicity, disrupted, mood swings throughout the day. And I've seen a lot of this with clients prior to really integrating the mineral component into it. Is a lot of people are really having a hard time with integrating, and seeing that the most important thing for integration is putting one on a correct remineralizing protocol and retesting every 3 months, because that's really going to be the most effective way to get everything out of working with the plant medicine. And that's honoring the medicine even more, not to discredit people who aren't integrating minerals into medicine work. A lot of it comes through just not being aware. And that's why I am beyond honored to be able to share this with more people, to bring more awareness to it. We can't talk about plant medicine without talking about minerals, just like we can't talk about plant medicine without talking about sleep, diet, creating happiness in your life for yourself, but not making anybody responsible for creating the happiness for you, and effectively learning how to move and knowing when to work out and knowing when to work in. Work in, be qigong, tai chi, restorative exercises that are creating more energy for you than the energy that you're expending. So it's really important to understand the intimate relationship that plant medicine has with everything that I just mentioned.
Yeah, it's so important.
It's not just one tool that's going to do it for you. It's a combination and an integration of the right tools that are going to allow you to effectively heal.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's almost like, again, we can make this analogy super simple, right? If you want to get big and strong, you don't just do one exercise, right? Even powerlifters do 3 exercises, so they're doing a combination of different things that leads to a particular result. If you're looking to be a better rock climber, there's going to be certain exercises you do, not just one. It's going to be multiple, right? If you're looking to be a better deadlifter, you're not just going to deadlift, you're going to do other things too. Very similar to if you want to be healthy and strong, you're not just going to eat steak, right? You're probably going to eat, if you're a carnivore, all the organs, right? Nose to tail. If you are not a carnivore, you're going to eat vegetables and these kind of things along with it. But again, it's like, where in our lives have we been able to take one thing and make it the entire full spectrum of said thing, right? Like it always takes this approach, and so I imagine for someone listening, they might go, oh my God, this feels like so much. Well, not really. You're already doing this in a lot of other areas of your life. So instead of looking at it as overwhelming, if anyone is right now, because that's my normal tendency, when I hear a lot of things like that, I go, oh my God, it's so much, but it's not, because guess what? If you start one thing today or before the next time you do a ceremony, great, you're now getting better than before that, right? So it doesn't have to all be done in one session, right? It can, right? If you work with someone like you who can lead someone through that, which is why I recommend you to everyone. But at the same time, you don't have to take all these things on at once. Just the simple awareness and going, okay, let me try this next time. Let me try to get that HTMA test. And I'm going to see that. Maybe I'll just start doing that and just start noticing, right? And have someone like yourself that can read it and really give them accurate information. And then maybe from there, they start picking up a, Tai Chi or Qigong practice in the mornings, right? And so they start integrating that in. Then maybe a month after that, they're like, you know what? Let me try my hand at this cold shower thing, right? Let me try my hand at this exercise thing. Let me try going to bed an hour earlier. Again, the time's going to go by anyway. So this is what I told myself when I used to get really anxious about, like, oh my God, perfectionism, is I was like, Ryan, at the end of the day, if you try to be a perfectionist, you're not going to end up doing well, right? I've seen that happen before in my own life. And so I was like, well, the only option is to take on one little thing at a time. And when my mind goes, well, think about how long it's going to take, I go, cool story. The time's going to go by anyway. So what am I really getting from thinking about how long it's going to take me to get to where I want to go? When in reality, the journey of 1,000,000 miles starts with but one step. So, yeah, it's an interesting paradox.
Definitely. And you can actually see this in people coming from the energetic characteristics of certain minerals. As an example, iron. Iron is a very masculine mineral. Copper is a very feminine mineral. So you can see it in people who are overly aggressive, angry, and just, for example, like a type A behavior, type A personality, is like an example of an imbalance of iron. So that can be iron overload, iron that is stuck in the tissues and isn't able to get recycled into the blood. So there's a disruption in the relationship between iron and copper. Now, people that have, for example, excess copper or unbound copper that their body can effectively utilize and express throughout the body, you're going to see somebody who is overly sensitive, somebody that may withdraw from situations because they're overly sensitive to the point where they don't really want to feel what it is they have to feel. So they withdraw from the situation. Calcium as an example. When I see a high calcium tissue on the HTMA test, I can already know that they've created a calcium shell. And a calcium shell is when you pretty much have a shell. You feel like you're cemented in yourself and you can't really engage in situations that you need to engage in order to effectively process whatever it is you need to process. So you're going to withdraw. So iron represents masculine, and iron will also represent rust when it can't get effectively activated into H2O and into energy. Well, rust creates oxidation. Copper, energy. Magnesium, fluidity. Calcium, cement. So anytime these minerals are imbalanced, it's going to have these energetic expressions and characteristics come at an imbalanced expression. So when we're lacking magnesium, we're going to be lacking fluidity. So we're not going to be flowing with life. We're not going to be able to get into a rhythmic flow and have rhythm, whatever it is that we're doing throughout the day. If we're lacking copper, or if we can't utilize the copper we have, guess what? We're going to have an energy deficit. And how many people are experiencing fatigue, tiredness? Fatigue, tiredness is an expression of not having copper or not being able to utilize the copper that we have. Copper toxicity or unbound copper. So it really comes in the dynamic between iron and copper, and the other minerals are just expressions of how iron and copper are communicating with each other.
Wow. Immediately as you were talking, I was thinking about Rachel, because she's had chronic insomnia her whole life, and she's worked with a couple FDNs and people of that nature. And, they check and say, like, yeah, your copper is in check, right? But, like, really that doesn't show the whole picture. And obviously, like, I know because she's very sensitive too, right? And she knows this. I'm not, giving any, private details, but, we just talked actually. And, she was like, yeah, everything's going great. She's on a retreat in Hawaii right now with like 20 women that she's leading. And she's like, it's amazing, but I really can't sleep. And so like, I realize that, like, I know how much work she does on herself, right? I know how many coaches she works with, how willing she is to dive into her shit, how many plant medicine ceremonies we've done where we've definitely purged stuff out, right? Like, so there's no shortage of her being like interested in diving into this stuff and having coaches and other people to guide her into her darkest parts. But it seems as though like it's something more physiologically based, right? Like, because you can tell, like, for me anyway, like usually what happens with me is if I find like a stubborn physical issue that won't leave, I'm like, okay, it's probably emotional. But when someone's like, all right, maybe this is emotional, and they dive into so many different things, they crack themselves open every which way to Sunday and they still can't figure it out, I'm like, okay, maybe this actually isn't so much of an emotional thing, or maybe it is, but it's not strictly an emotional thing. It's an emotional thing caused by an imbalance in something like, copper or iron or something of that nature. So that actually, spawns my curiosity peak. So that's really cool.
Definitely. And I can say that insomnia is from copper toxicity.
Yeah.
To understand the relationship that copper and zinc have with each other. So when there's copper toxicity, you'll commonly have a zinc deficiency. Another very important thing to understand is, just so people don't run out and start just supplementing with zinc if they're expecting they have copper toxicity, is if you supplement with zinc without putting into consideration what your sodium levels are, zinc can actually displace sodium. So if you have low zinc and low sodium and you start supplementing with zinc, it can actually lower the sodium even more. So it's super important to really understand not just the relationship that two minerals have with each other, but the relationship that all of the minerals have with each other. Not just one ratio, but the ratio relationships as well. Because if you just focus on one ratio without putting into consideration the other ratios or the other minerals that are imbalanced, you can actually cause further imbalances down the road. So it's kind of like a puzzle, and learning how to actually put the pieces together to where you can actually complete the puzzle. And completing that puzzle is different for each individual. So to have a protocol that works for everybody is far from really what is accurate for effectively getting somebody healthy. The reason why I really like using HTMA testing for working with individuals is, one, it helps get down to the underlying cause on why somebody has a pathology, a disease, an illness. Two, it helps optimize one's health. So somebody feels healthy already, but they just want to optimize it. For example, like in your situation, HTMA testing and looking at really what your mineral status is the key area when it comes to optimization. We can biohack, do all these different advanced biohacking techniques, but if we're not focusing on our mineral status, these biohacking techniques aren't really going to have much of an impact. We may be getting 20 to 30% out of, for example, doing stem cell therapy or ozone therapy or red light therapy or sauna therapy. But when our mineral status is in check and is balanced, then we can actually utilize and get everything out of these different biohacking techniques or therapies that we're doing, including plant medicine work. And I've been able to experience myself now working with medicine being in more of a balanced state. Am I saying I'm perfectly balanced? No, but I'm a lot more balanced than I was a year ago, and seeing how my body's a lot more receptive to receiving the medicine, because I think we'd all agree when we're taking any type of plant medicine, we're going in, and it's an expression of our inner world. And if we have a very imbalanced inner world, a very imbalanced mineral status, the medicine is just going to be expressing that to a greater degree.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it goes back to what I say about cannabis, but all plant medicines, that they are simply a mirror, right? And sometimes if you haven't looked in the mirror for a while, you can be like, yikes, I didn't realize my hair looked that way. Oh my goodness, I trimmed my beard, I look homeless. It's like you can realize a lot of the things you don't like right off the bat, right? Or another way to say that is when, light hits a dark room, sometimes the first thing you notice are the cobwebs. You're like, good God, my dresser's in the middle of the floor. No wonder I've been smashing into it every night. A lot of the times, like, that can be the most challenging aspect. But at the same time, if we understand these types of things, then we're less likely to fall into victimhood during the plant medicine experience. And we're more likely to say, okay, there's definitely something in there I need to address. Now, when I come out, the work begins of figuring out, like, who can I work with? What questions do I need to ask? What did it feel like? Now we actually have a breadcrumb trail to follow. But I think that, like, understanding these things gives us context. So now if someone listens to this and they go into a plant medicine experience and they have a similar experience to what you were talking about with, that cluttered inner world, well, now they have another avenue from which to research, right? They know, like, maybe it's that mineral thing that Brian and Jason were talking about. Let me dive into that, right? And for most people, I would argue to say that you're probably going to have some type of mineral imbalance, right? Unless you're really focusing on this stuff. I mean, again, it's not something that we've ever been taught. Even for, like, people that go to the gym, like, there's things that, like, if you're looking to get healthy, you'll dive into, like exercise. Maybe if you're really into it, like meditating, breath work, cold baths, like, things like that. But mineral levels are not really high on that list, in terms of, like, what people are aware of when they first get into this stuff. And I think that's, one of the many reasons that this is such an important topic, because even for me, I'm like, hey, I want to get more into this, right? And I've been in this work for 12 years, and so I think it shows that you can always get better results in life if you're willing to get curious, and if you're willing to listen to people that, like yourself, that have experience in this realm and can articulate it so damn well that it's easy to understand. I mean, these are really challenging concepts if you really think about it, but it's all in the teacher and his or her way of teaching it that allows it to be to land, right? And so for me, even, like, listening to this, I'm like, oh, this makes logical sense to me. Like, it actually pings a lot of things in me that are like, yes, this is actually something I haven't looked into yet. And I think the whole biohacking thing is an interesting statement too, because I think the term biohack too, like I think the people that are attracted to biohacking are a lot of times the people that are kind of just like, give me the pill, I don't want to do the work type people. And again, no diss on biohacking. I mean, the things are incredible. But, I was talking to, who was it? It was either Mr. Newts or Nathan Riley or someone, but they were talking about how Paul was like, hey, let's start calling it bioenhancing, because again, there's great ability in that. But it's kind of like if you look to build the top floor penthouse suite before your foundation is solid, well, you can have the most beautiful suite in the world, but that's just still going to fall when the wind hits it,
Another metaphor to give is, I'm going to give this metaphor for doing chakra analysis and professional and personal and spiritual development coaching with my clients is, for example, if you don't feel safe and grounded, you don't have security in your life, and you feel like you don't really have tribal association and family connection, how are you going to feel safe in intimate relationships? If you don't have a strong foundation, how are you going to get to the second story? How are you going to get to the third story? How are you going to get to the fourth story and access the heart? So when it comes to doing deeper spiritual work, for example, accessing the upper chakras, we have to have a strong root chakra and strong foundation. Well, metaphorically speaking, that foundation is our mineral constitution and our mineral status. Now, another very important thing to consider here is toxic metals, heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, lead, aluminum. Heavy metals are not biodegradable, so they accumulate. So actually what we call aging is the accumulation of toxic metals. And toxic metals will displace minerals, magnesium, potassium, sodium, calcium, etc. Now, anytime there's a mineral deficiency, depending on the magnitude of the mineral deficiency, it's going to activate the fear pathway. Have it be if the person is conscious or unconscious of that fear. So until we address the mineral imbalances and deficiencies, one is going to constantly be in a fear state, which is going to significantly impact and lead to kidney issues, because kidneys are associated with emotion fear. And working with medicines, for example, like with ayahuasca, is going to actually further activate the fear pathway. And I've heard many stories of that happening, actually. So when somebody has a significant mineral imbalance, the last medicine I recommend for them to work with is ayahuasca and wachuma. I had a client that I was talking to yesterday on a consultation, and he wanted to work with ayahuasca. And I said, to be honest, I do not recommend you work with ayahuasca. If any medicine, it's very, very small doses of psilocybin. But until you get your minerals more balanced, working with really any medicine isn't going to really be that effective. And the reason on why you're wanting to work with medicine is simply an expression of your mineral imbalances that you have.
Yeah.
And we're coming into this life already with mineral imbalances, and just through the stressors that we're going through childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, are further increasing these mineral imbalances and deficiencies. And you really start seeing this around, age late 30s and 40s, when a lot of these heavy metals have accumulated to the degree where they're really starting to create symptoms. I mean, mercury is 1,000 times more toxic than aluminum. So mercury is one of the most toxic metals. And a lot of people have mercury toxicity. And that may not show up on the toxic metal graph on HTMA testing, but you can actually see the hidden toxicity in other ratios, like the zinc to copper ratio as an example. So that's a very important thing to consider. Blood work in urine analysis testing isn't going to necessarily pick up on that. Why? Is because heavy metals get stored in the cells and in various organs and glands. So using blood testing to reveal heavy metal toxicity isn't really going to be that accurate, and it's not going to really reveal what it needs to reveal for that individual and for that practitioner. So if somebody has had blood work done and it hasn't shown any heavy metal toxicity, that's not to say that they don't have it. And just because it's not displaying on an HTMA heavy metal graph, again, doesn't mean they don't have it. I can confidently say that everybody has some degree of heavy metal toxicity. Now, to what degree is it really significantly impacting their health? Hard to say until you really interpret the HTMA report.
That's amazing, man. I mean, I told you at the start of this, part of me doing this episode with you is selfish, right? I mean, like, I really wanted to know this stuff too. And I imagine for everyone listening, there's so much in here. And, I think that just with what you just said, like, that's the challenge I see with even Rachel getting her tests, right? Is like someone, and again, like, I'm not dissing any FDM people or whatever, but it seems as though like there's just constantly new information coming out about how these things relate to one another. And what I've seen in terms of her is kind of like that general thing of like, well, here's your list. And it seems like these are the things on your list that are high or low. So we're going to do whatever we need to do, supplement whatever to bring those things that are low back to high, high back to low, or back to, the right dose. And then you're good, right? But a lot of the times, like, there's not too much context given surrounding like why they're doing what they're doing. And I think for me, like, at least for me, I mean, I imagine people listening maybe can agree, and I imagine you're probably similar, like, I don't need to go to a PhD program to understand what's happening, but I like to understand like how you just broke it down. Like, I like to understand why each thing is which, because then I have the knowledge to back up. If I'm feeling a certain way, I can go, oh, maybe that's copper or iron or this or that, right? And so it gives me a little bit more ability to be my own guru, right? Because, everything I do in life and everything I teach in the Connect with Cannabis program and all the programs I do is about helping people become their own guru. And a big part of that, right, where knowledge really comes into play here is being able to back up the sensations or like the states you feel in your body. Because if you don't know how to articulate, like, yes, I'm feeling this certain type of way, well, then it's really hard for someone like you or me to even start working with them on like, well, I don't really know how to even dive into this, right? That's what the tests are there for and things like that. But if you don't have someone there that's actually trained in how these relate to one another, they can't really teach you what to look out for. Because again, even if someone works with you or someone like you, like, you're going to be meeting with them maybe a couple times a week for an hour, 2 hours, but what do they do the other 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So like, people need to start becoming educated on like just how to at least tell some symptoms, like, oh, I'm feeling something off, I got to go see, so-and-so and figure out what's going on, and just pick up a little of this along the way, right? It's like how with most people, you don't need to necessarily go figure out how an engine works to drive a car, but you might want to figure out how to change a tire. I want to figure out how to change your oil, right? Like, what are the basic things that you need to know to make sure that if your car breaks down, it's probably going to be one of these couple things that you can fix to get on the road, and then you leave the other stuff to the professionals, right? The people that are obsessed with this stuff. And so I think like, mineral levels, these kind of things, or those kind of things like changing the tire, right? At least being aware of what they might feel like in your body can give you context to be able to go seek out a practitioner that can help you in that. And therefore, this is really what I think is, a lot of people think about the psychedelic industry and they look at more of the shiny objects, like the actual ceremonies themselves, the medicines, even like, the concept of the practitioner. But even within that realm of the practitioner, they don't talk about like, well, okay, he or she is hopefully very well skilled and trained in the realm of medicine space, right? And holding space and working with the medicine. But like, what do they have with regards to, this kind of stuff, right? What do they have? Like, how well are they eating and sleeping and drinking? Like, are they living, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, a highly optimized life, right? Other than the medicine space. Because being just well-versed in medicine is great, very handy, especially when you're a shaman or, practicing medicine worker. But it's not the whole picture too. Because again, a ceremony, right? Doing plant medicines is a couple hours, maybe at maximum, maybe once a month if you're doing some protocol, something like that. What's the rest of your life too? And so that's why I love everything you do, man, because it's really exactly what I look to do with cannabis. And what I do is like, I help people realize like, there are 4 categories of your life: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Paul calls them the 4 doctors. And so if you feel dependent on something, it's something in one of these 4 areas that's yearning for help. And you're probably unconscious to the fact that you're numbing it out because you're trying to get out of discomfort, And so just giving people that awareness, they now go, oh, okay, cool. So now they can keep track of like, I really crave cannabis a lot before I go to work. What does that mean? And now they have a breadcrumb trail to follow. So again, like, I want people to be able to be their own gurus and follow the information. And then when they get stuck, that's when they go to someone, so they actually feel empowered to be able to start learning as they go. Because that's exciting to me anyways.
Definitely. And just a couple of things that I want to mention. For example, addiction. And I know a lot of people that are wanting to work with plant medicine for addiction. Addiction is simply an expression of various mineral imbalances. Therefore, addiction won't effectively actually get resolved and addressed until those mineral imbalances get corrected. When it comes to supplementation and taking certain minerals that are optimal for your situation, most of the mineral supplements out there on the market are actually not effectively absorbed and utilized in the body. So you can be taking magnesium. You can be taking, for example, 5 to 700 milligrams, but you may only be absorbing 10 to 15, 20% of that. So it's really important to put that into consideration because a lot of the minerals that people are taking aren't really getting absorbed and utilized in the body. So it's important to understand when it comes to recommending the minerals for an individual that they're taking ones that they're going to be able to actually absorb and utilize. Because there's a difference between absorbing it and there's a difference between utilizing it. So there's a lot of stuff out there that you may absorb, but you may not be able to utilize. And if one is on really a correct remineralizing protocol, they should be noticing significant changes within as little as 1 to 2 months, if it's the right program for them. And that simply will express if the practitioner knows what they're doing, you know? And another very important thing to consider is mineral, you can call it mineral therapy, mineral coaching, mineral rebalancing. We can actually do trauma healing and shadow work because we're able to retrace traumas that we've suppressed and repressed, that we've shut ourselves off from feeling. And when we take the right mineral or right minerals to allow us to feel again, we can actually retrace those traumas and go back into the experience so we can process it and discharge it. You know, so I've seen that as well as when one is taking, for example, the right minerals to where they get back into more of a balanced and homeostasis state, they're actually doing a lot of trauma and shadow work as well because they're retracing traumas that they've disengaged themselves from feeling due to having the mineral imbalances and deficiencies.
That is very interesting. And that's actually really interesting you mentioned that because I put down this note, like minerals equal emotions, you know, or something like that. Because what I was starting to catch the drift of as you were talking is that, you know, for a lot of us, I know, especially I'll talk about myself, like there's no shortage of me yearning and wanting and being devoted to, you know, healing my shadow, you know, going into trauma, those kind of things. But you know, it's funny because when I've gone to some like retreats for this kind of stuff, you know, I've written in the office like, oh, maybe I have a block there, but like, it's really hard for me to do like an inner child healing thing where, you know, the classic, you know, type of Gestalt therapy where you sit in a chair, someone else sits in the chair. They, you know, they try to trigger you by saying things that they ask you like, hey, you know, what kind of thing? I'm going to say a couple things, you know, let me know which one triggers you. You pick that one, you trace the feeling in your body, and then you have a release. Like the whole time I was doing it, I was like, like, I don't know. It's really interesting for me. Like if I get triggered on something, like I'm there, I could probably go there then. Right? Like if someone was to story work me right then. But it's really hard for me if I'm not already in a state like that to invoke that type of state. And so like maybe that's a mineral deficiency, you know, is what I'm realizing. Because I know that, you know, for instance, one thing, and again, like I've gone back and forth with this a lot, and I'm actually glad to be talking to you about this because you'll probably be able to shed some light on it. But, you know, the whole concept of like cathartic crying, right? So I hadn't had a cathartic cry in probably, I don't even know, maybe since I was like 18, I want to guess around there. 2 years ago, I did a high dose psilocybin experience with Rachel. And, you know, I remember we went really deep. It was not long after we had done 5-MEO DMT. And so we did not understand the interaction between, you know, things just being a little stronger after that. And so we got sent pretty far out. And I was having a great time, you know, went through some, you know, just challenges coming up, nothing crazy. But then what happened was I was sitting there and she was stuck in a loop. I didn't even realize that she wasn't really there anymore. But, you know, I was sitting there and I was going out and I had this thought come to me and I said it out loud. I went, you know, like, because I had this whole belief that I couldn't cry. And I was like, you know, laughing's a lot like crying. And the second I said that, it just clicked and I felt something like crack open. And then I just cathartically cried for like 2 hours. Came out of it, was like, what the hell was that? Right? Like, that was amazing, you know? And ever since then, I have it. Now, the mind fuck here is like, do I just not have much to cry about? Is that why I'm not crying? Or am I hiding stuff? Or am I not able to access it? So I think for many people listening, they might be in a similar boat to me. Like, what do you do when you're looking to optimize everything? But also sometimes your mind gets in the way too. Like, what would you say with that? Like, for me, like, I'm genuinely happy most of the time. I have a really strong purpose. I have, you know, good family connections and things like that. You know, I imagine it's probably impossible to say exactly, but if you looked at someone like me on average, would it be that, you know, maybe there's just not that much stuff in there that, you know, deserves a cathartic cry? I would likely to say probably not. But number two, would it be like a mineral imbalance? Would that be something like, is there any certain mineral that immediately you go, that one? Not that I'm going to go out and start taking it because I already know what that can do. But is there anything that information that would give you if you heard someone like me?
Definitely. And I don't necessarily want to say a certain mineral that can come up with it indicating an imbalance, because I don't want to be guessing. That's why I say you got to test. You don't guess unless you're just going to be pissing in the wind. I can't say it's definitely some sort of an expression of a mineral imbalance or imbalances. For example, on average, we think roughly about 68,000 thoughts a day, in which are about 98% negative. I'd say right now in our society, it's probably closer around 99.5% negative. Well, our thoughts and emotions are simply reflections, and they're mirroring back our mineral status. So the way we emotionalize is an expression of really what our mineral constitution is. It's the foundation, and everything is built on that foundation. If you have a slanted and a weak foundation, well, it's going to be very hard to access the upper stories. And that's the thing, when we're wanting to work with plant medicines and we have an imbalanced foundation, we may access it, but we're not going to be able to stay there. So you may have a little glimpsy taste of it, but then you're going to lose that taste because you don't have the foundation to hold that capacity for really what unconditional love is. And that's a significant amount of infinite energy. So to be able to hold it and have the capacity to be living in it requires a very strong foundation. And I have to say from my own experiences, I've been more emotional and more sensitive than I've ever been. Why? Is because I am starting to bring things back into balance that are allowing me to feel things I haven't felt for over a decade. And I'm retracing memories and feelings that I shut myself off from feeling. Why? Is because I'm starting to allow myself to feel, because I'm bringing myself back into more of a balanced state. So it's understanding that when you're working on balancing your minerals, you're going to be having some phases where you're going through a lot of purging emotionally, but you're going through that emotional purging is because you're bringing yourself back into feeling, and you have to feel in order to heal.
Yeah, man, that just really brought so much together for me, because that's kind of what it was. Like, a lot of times when I talk to people, and of course I'm in this realm, so I get it. People will be like, well, you're not emotionally aware enough, or you need to get more in touch with your emotions. I'm like, that is such a vague way to guide someone. Like, hey, that thing that you're already having challenge with, you just got to get better at it. It's like, what? So I like this, because I think for many people, they like this process of like, hey, now there's something you can actually go test and figure out what's going on behind the lines. And dude, there's so much more I want to get in with you. We're going to have to do a part 2 to our part 4 on this One Time on Psychedelics podcast. But Jason, I want to make sure that I wrap up with people knowing where they can find you, because I think a lot of people are going to come from this realizing like, I want some help with this. I know I did, right? So where can people find you? If there's anything that you're coming out with that you want to plug, any place that you're going to be that you want people to watch you on, tell the people where they can find you, man.
Yeah, I'd say the simplest way to contact me is just through my website at specializedhealthandexercise.com. And is A-N-D, exercise.com. And you can just schedule a complimentary 15 to 20 minute consultation, and we can further get into whatever you're inquiring about. Social media, I do not know if I'm going to be on there next year. So my site is the best way to contact me.
Beautiful. I'll miss our Instagram messages, man, but I know it's for the best for sure. Because trust me, social media is an interesting animal. It can be a great tool. I've met a lot of amazing people, but it can also be a very disempowering tool. So not to mention one that gets into every aspect of your life too.
Definitely. And I would love to do a part 2, and we can probably do a part 3 after the part 2, because there's so many more things that I'd love to kind of get into the nitty gritty about, because it can be very, very revealing for a lot of people, because I know there are hundreds of thousands of people out there that are really struggling, and they're in a situation where they don't know what to do. And they don't know what to do because they haven't had the awareness of how important minerals are influencing their health. So just having this little tad bit of information can be very eye-opening and very inspiring for them to have faith that they actually can heal. And I myself was in that position for over a decade, always having this missing piece of the puzzle that I really couldn't have access to. And I didn't know what was happening, going through stem cell therapy, TMS therapy, ketamine therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and having little to no success. And the reason why I wasn't having any success, because I didn't have balanced minerals. And if you don't have any balanced minerals, it doesn't matter what you're going to be doing. It's not going to have really much of an impact. So I would love to get into more of the mineral relation with health.
Oh, dude, consider it done. Guys, Jason's coming back. We'll get the date out for sure. And, dude, I've already asked you the last question before, but I'm going to try to do this on the fly and change it up and see what happens. You down for it?
Love it.
All right, let's do it. So let's say someone listens to this episode and they're excited to dive into minerals in their own life, right? What is the one piece of advice you would suggest to them to allow them to discern who to work with when it comes to minerals? And of course, you guys already know who I plug for this, Jason, but say they go out and they try to find a practitioner, like how would they discern who's going to be educated enough to go into this much detail with them if for any reason they choose not to work with you, even though they totally should?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the number one thing is trust. You got to connect with the person, and most likely that's going to be online these days. So definitely recommend having a face-to-face Zoom meeting with them and asking them whatever questions you feel like you need to ask them that are relevant for your situation. And, it's like that saying, nobody cares what you know until they know you care. So to find somebody that cares about you, and that's not just treating you like just being another patient, because you're a freaking soul. Therefore, it's important to have an intimate relationship when it comes to anybody that you're working with. So the relationships that I have with my clients are no different than the relationships I have with friends, loved ones, and family members. So you have to have that trust and you have to have that intimacy. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about intimacy with deep care and compassion. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing: deep care and compassion.
Absolutely. I mean, what does intimacy mean? Into you, me see, right? And, it was really cool when I heard that for the first time, because I was like, man, I wonder if they constructed the word to do that or if it just happened afterwards. But regardless, there was something cool happening there. So, wow, guys. Every time I have Jason on, I am continually amazed at the depth of information he can tap into while still explaining things in ways in which anyone can understand and benefit from. I believe it is a true sign of a master to not only know your stuff, but to be able to articulate it in a way that allows anyone, regardless of prior experience, to be able to understand what it is you are looking to communicate. And Jason fits that description to a T. To keep up to date on all of the amazing things Jason is putting together and offering to the world, check out the show notes for this episode, where I will be listing all of the easiest ways to get in touch with him. Jason, thank you for always being down to come on the show and riff with me, for helping so many people unlock more joy and happiness within their lives, and for being such an inspirational individual to have in my life. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.